Outside, the blizzard roared like a wounded beast, its icy breath hurling shards of ice against the rooftops and windows until they shuddered under the assault. The small town lay buried in white, its streets deserted, its houses cowering behind drifts higher than the sidewalk. Only the howling wind moved through the silent world, promising nothing but more cold and more isolation, just when it seemed no storm could feel any more relentless. What none inside the safety of their homes suspected was that beyond every shuttered window, another life clung to the fragile thread of survival. Inside a weathered cabin on the edge of town, the fire crackled with a gentle persistence, painting warm, dancing shadows on the dark wooden walls. Ben Carter sat alone in his worn armchair, a cup of long-forgotten tea resting in his calloused hands. Since his wife's passing, silence had become his closest companion and carried with it a weight that knotted his chest tighter each. The house, once echoing with laughter, now remembered only his soft sighs and the wind's low groan against the timbers. Around him, the storm raged. Inside him, a different storm of memories and regret. But he did have one light in that darkness. His 8-year-old daughter, Emily, sleeping soundly in the next room, her steady breaths reassuring him that he wasn't entirely alone. Still, there was something he didn't know, that beyond this flickering hearth, in the depths of the white void, one soul was on its last leg of hope. Scout the German Shepherd pulled herself forward through drifts that reached her belly, each step a monumental effort. Her once gleaming coat was now heavy with matted ice, her paws raw from battling frozen ground. Every breath escaped her in thin, misty puffs, gone almost as soon as they appeared. She was a veteran rescue dog, once guided by a calm handler's voice through collapsing buildings, but now she was alone, driven only by instinct and the distant memory of a safe kennel. Her powerful legs, once pillars of strength, trembled with exhaustion. Yet her eyes, dark and determined, refused to dim. She knew someone was out there, a life that depended on her finding help before it was too late. Through the white blur, Scout spotted a small figure crouched beneath a crumbling doorway. Ethan, no more than 10, sat curled into himself, his thin jacket doing nothing against the gusting wind. Their eyes met in a moment that felt like forever, two souls too weary to fear each other. Without a single word, Ethan reached into his pocket and produced a scrap of bread, breaking it gently in half. Extending one piece toward Scout, he offered more than food, he offered solidarity. Scout sniffed the air, weighed her options, then took it with utmost care, as if afraid to break the fragile piece. Side by side, they leaned together, sharing the flicker of warmth between them as the storm howled on. It was a silent pact, lost dog and homeless boy, bound by necessity, relying on each other's fragile heartbeat. But shelter isn't found by comfort alone. Ethan's breaths grew shallow and erratic, and Scout's instincts snapped into sharp focus. She had stood on this razor's edge before. The brittle boundary between life and death whispered to her through every fiber. Gathering her remaining strength, she pressed on, dragging her paws toward the nearest cluster of houses. At every door she scratched with desperate hope, only to be met with the slam of fear, as if an ice-crusted dog at night were a monster rather than a messenger of rescue. Yet each rejection only fueled her resolve. She couldn't turn back. Ethan's life depended on her next move. At the edge of town, Scout spotted a single window glowing with a soft golden light. As if drawn by some ancient promise of sanctuary, she made her way across the frozen porch and lifted a trembling paw to the door. The scratch was faint, almost swallowed by the wind. Inside, Ben Carter heard it as though through a dream, a single plea he could not ignore. He set aside his empty mug, muscles stiff with disuse, and rose to meet whatever waited beyond the threshold. When the door cracked open, a blast of frigid air burst in, carrying with it the sight of a large snow-crusted canine, whose clouded brown eyes fixed on him with unspoken desperation. Emily appeared at Ben's shoulder, her wide eyes reflecting the same shock, and without a word she stepped forward, touching Scout's ice-hard fur. "We have to help her, Dad," she breathed. In that moment, Ben's hesitation melted and he stepped aside. "Come on in, girl." And just like that, for the first time in a long time, a door opened not to loss, but to new beginnings. The warmth wrapped Scout like a fragile shield, coaxing violent shivers from her exhausted body. Ben knelt and wiped away the crusted ice with an old towel, revealing a worn leather collar beneath matted fur. Inscribed was a single name, a Scout, and the faint insignia of the local search and rescue team. Recognition flickered through Ben's mind, stories of fearless nines flashing past, dogs that climbed through rubble to find buried survivors. Here she lay, trembling on his cabin floor, far from any disaster zone. Emily sat close, her small hand stroking Scout's back. She's a rescue dog, isn't she, Dad? Ben nodded slowly, torn between wonder and concern. But Scout's eyes never left the door, ears alert at every gust, still seeking what she came for. She wasn't here just for warmth. She was here on a mission. Ben retrieved his phone and snapped a photo, posting it to the town's community board. Replies flooded in. A handful recognized the emblem, confirming she'd served on real-world rescues, but no one knew her current handler or how she'd become stranded. As Ben scrolled, Scout curled beside Emily, her body finally still, but her eyes alive with purpose. She wasn't looking for comfort. She was searching for a life left behind in the storm. Ben understood. They could not let her mission end here. Late that night, the cabin's fire burned low. Ben awoke to find Emily asleep against Scout's side, the dog's ears twitching at every whisper of wind. Though surrounded by warmth, Scout lay tense, eyes unwaveringly fixed on the darkened door as if awaiting its opening at any second. Stepping to the window, Ben parted the curtain and stared into the endless white. Nothing stirred. But when he turned back, Scout's look was pleading. She needed to finish what she started. Emily rubbed her eyes and whispered, Dad, she's worried about someone, isn't she? Ben felt a quiet pull, an inner voice he had long ignored. And he knew what he must do. Follow Scout into the storm. Bundled in coats and boots, Ben opened the door to a gale that bit like a living thing. Scout darted into the night, nose low to the ground, carving a path through drifts taller than herself. Behind her came a man, a girl, and a dog, linked by hope and silent determination. They retraced Scout and Ethan's steps to the crumbling doorway, now buried under fresh snow, but found no sign of the boy. Still, Scout did not waver. She pressed on, scenting a faint trail that led them away from town into wide open fields where midnight reigned unchallenged. The fields felt infinite, a frozen ocean of white under a sky heavy with clouds. Each crunch of footsteps sounded impossibly loud, each gust of wind a reminder of how small and vulnerable they were. But Scout moved with laser focus, her old rescue instincts fully awakened. Her nose led them to an old barn half swallowed by drifts. Heart pounding, she scrambled up to the door, her cracked nails scratching the wood until it groaned open. Inside, faint whimpers guided Ben's gaze to a corner piled with rags. There lay Ethan, frail and trembling, his breath so faint it might have been imagined. Scout bolted forward and curled protectively around him, nudging his frostbitten cheek with a gentle nose. Ben knelt and gathered the boy into his arms, stunned by how light and cold Ethan felt. Emily hovered close, worry etched on her face, but no hint of fear, only faith that they had come in time. We're taking him home, Ben said, voice firm yet gentle. Scout stayed wrapped around Ethan like a living blanket, her steady warmth a pledge that no harm could touch him now. And so they made their way back across the frozen fields, each step carrying them further from despair and closer to the life Scout had sworn to protect. Back at the cabin, the hearth's glow stretched across the room as Ben laid Ethan on a thick rug. Emily draped blankets over him while Scout curled at his side, her body molded to his frame as if to ward off every last remnant of cold. For a long moment Ethan did not move, then a faint whimper escaped him and his eyelids flickered open. He didn't know where he was, only that warmth and safety enveloped him for the first time in days. Ben sank into his armchair and watched in awe. His home, once defined by sorrowful silence, now brimmed with life and promise. Emily looked up and whispered, "A Scout saved him, didn't she?" Ben nodded, tears shining in his eyes. "And not just him," he murmured. "She saved us all." When morning came, the storm had passed, leaving the world outside tranquil and new. Snow lay like fresh parchment across every surface. The air, though sharp, no longer felt hostile. Scout remained by Ethan's side, alert at every stir, while Emily told stories to coax colour back into his cheeks. Their vigil was broken by the crunch of tyres, a salt-crusted pickup rolling to a stop at the driveway's end. A tall man stepped out, relief flooding his worn features when he saw Scout standing in the doorway. "A Scout," he called, voice cracking with emotion. Ben narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" The man climbed the porch steps and extended a hand. Mike Dawson, Scout's former handler. Scout's body stiffened as recognition flickered in her eyes, but she never left Ethan's side. In that moment, Mike realized something deeper than duty. Scout had found a new purpose. He knelt beside the boy and studied Ethan's pale face, quiet relief mixing with concern. "He's alone?" Mike asked. Ben shook his head. "No family until tonight." Mike exhaled, then offered, "Maybe I can give them both a home." Scout's gaze never wavered from Ethan. Emily grasped Ben's hand in a squeeze of pure hope. And as Mike, Ethan, and Scout prepared to leave together, there were no farewells, because some bonds go beyond words. At the door, Scout paused, tail giving a single slow wag, a silent promise that Ben and Emily would always be part of her story. Behind them, the small town stirred. Doors that once slammed shut now stood ready to open. A new rescue team formed that day, Scout's second chance, a living reminder that even the smallest act of kindness can rewrite a life's fate. Under the gentle glow of the cabin window, Ben watched snowflakes drift down, each one a spark of hope. He knew no matter how fierce the next storm might be, they would never turn away again, because sometimes all it takes to change a life is one open door.